All right, joining me now, Senator Steve Daines. Welcome back to the Alec Lace Show.
Good to join you, Alec.
It's great to see you. We got the big, beautiful bill just got past the House. These guys were there all night. They got it done. The goal was to get it passed by Memorial Day, and that did happen. So what was your take on this thing going through the House?
Well, first of all, we're going to start calling Speaker Johnson Moses. I mean, literally, he parted the Red Sea once again. Many thought 24 hours ago this wasn't going to happen, and he delivered it. In fact, I believe they had one congressman from New York who negotiated some of the SALT changes that slept in and missed the vote. So they would have actually won it by 2 votes. So congratulations, Speaker Johnson. Very important next step. Now it comes our way to the Senate. We'll take Memorial Day recess. Staff will relock and reload. And then when we come back that first week in June, we'll be off the races.
Yeah, and I just was saying that Speaker Johnson's been coming under the gun on X from a lot of the influencers have been hammering him. And now you got to give credit where credit is due. His goal was to get it done by Memorial Day, and he got that accomplished. So I think he gets a little breathing room now. I think he gets a lot of the attention off of him now. He got this done. I know President Trump came to the House to plead his case for this thing and was able to get it done. Now, you say to get this past the Senate, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, a simple majority needs to go, not the filibuster, right? We just need the 51 votes. Is that correct?
Correct. That's the nature of what we call this reconciliation process. That's kind of getting into the weeds. But what that means is the Senate can pass tax reform with simply 50 plus one, which it might come down to 50 plus JD Vance when the dust all says. We have 53 Republicans. It'll be the same situation that Speaker Johnson had, very tight margins. In fact, Speaker Johnson could lose no more than 3 or that bill sunk in the House. It's the same thing in the Senate. We can lose no more than 3 because a 50-50 tie, JD Vance comes in, kicks the field goal, we win. And that's probably where this bill shakes out by the time we vote on it. And our goal would be to get this done sooner versus later in June and have this bill ready to be signed by President Trump on the 4th of July.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And I know I had I had Senator Ron Johnson on a couple of weeks ago. It sounds like he's a no. So I think there's definitely going to be, it may come down to, like you say, having Vice President Vance break the tie here or put us over the hump. But do you expect any proposals or any amendments to this thing where the House will have to come back and negotiate or something like that? Or you think we're going to be able to move forward with this as it is?
Well, look, I'm a member of the Senate Finance Committee, which is the Ways and Means Committee of the House. So that's the Senate committee that has jurisdiction over tax policy. The Senate Republicans on the Finance Committee, there's 14 of us. We've been meeting on a daily basis, literally for a couple of months. We meet all the time, going through in detail all the policy pieces, keeping a close eye on the House. In many ways, we're flying like a formation of Blue Angels, flying tight. Jason Smith, chairman of the Ways and Means. Jason and I are texting and calling. I served with Jason in the House once upon a time. Same thing with Mike Crapo and Jason Smith. Here's the bottom line. We've been staying in tight communication, realizing that the Senate will impose its will in this bill to make it better. I told Jason Smith this morning, I texted him, I said, we're going to put a little Botox in that big, beautiful bill and make it just a little more beautiful. There's a couple things we need to do, but we also recognize they've got a tenuous majority in the House, and we can't probably make too many significant changes, or we could lose the House votes. So that's the walk of wisdom we've got to be journeying here in the moment. But I think one thing we're going to do, Alec, that I'll be fighting hard for is permanence on R&D expensing and capital expensing. The House only put it in for 4 years and then a cliff. I do not like temporary tax policies. It creates great uncertainty for businesses, especially for investments in capital and investments in R&D. If we're going to stimulate and grow this economy, expensing capital is huge. If we're going to beat the Chinese in terms of global competitiveness, expensing R&D, incentivizing research and development, really, really important. So that's something I'll be fighting for. I think we've got alignment. I know our colleagues in the House expect us to do that. That'll be at least one major change we will make on the Senate side.
So when just because I'm not familiar, so bear with me there. So if you make this change, you get this in there, does that then have to get revoted on by the House, or how does that work?
Correct. So we will make our changes to it, and then we'll send it back to the House, and the House will have to approve the Senate product.
Okay, and then it goes to the president's desk, and we get past that process.
Correct.
Okay, so a couple of more hurdles to go through here. Just we're in the finish. We're in the home stretch here. We can see the finish line. We just got to get it there.
Absolutely. Well, I think both chambers have their challenges, but I would argue the House even more so. And so, really, a huge win this morning for President Trump, Speaker Mike Johnson, and his team to get this across the finish line. And we're ready to receive it. I mean, we literally, when we got the manager's package late last night, our teams have been all over this with fine-tooth combs, looking at what's working, what's not, because there's going to be some changes we will make in this bill, but we don't want to upset it such that Speaker Johnson can't get it passed a second time. But he's going to have to get it passed one more time, and then it goes to President Trump's desk.
Okay, so not out of the woods just yet, but it looks more promising. Now, the no tax on tips wasn't a. I think the no tax on overtime is included in this, but not the no tax on tips. You guys have this in a separate bill that just went undefeated there, 100 votes to nothing, and so now that has to go to the House to get voted on. But how come the no tax on tips was separate from the no tax on overtime? That's in the big beautiful bill, right?
So actually, the House bill has no tax on tips. It's got the no tax Social Security, no tax overtime. That's included in the House bill. What happened on the Senate side is the Democrats were panicking because they realized how attractive these policies are to hardworking middle-class Americans, providing them a tax break. So it's the Democrats made a political move to pass by what we call unanimous consent. So they just took the no tax on tips, pulled it out, and said, let's pass it by unanimous consent, which means you just walk down to the Senate floor. You say, I move that we pass this bill. If nobody objects to it, it passes by unanimous consent. So this was a Democrat move to try to save some face, because these are some very attractive tax policies that President Trump campaigned on. And they know these are good policies that they'll vote against our bill, our big, beautiful bill, but they want to say they voted for no tax on tips.
That makes sense. Yeah, sneaky move there to try to take some credit to say, hey, this was our idea, because I remember that was something that Kamala Harris was doing during the campaign, was taking some of these things like the no tax on tips and all of a sudden claiming like, oh, that's what I want to do. And it was taking some of these ideas. So they did that with this piece. But this will all still be, because I know, the no tax on tips is a huge thing. There's so many people, especially in the restaurant industry and everywhere else. But the no tax on overtime is a major deal for so many Americans. I know for myself, I'm a railroad guy. I work for the railroad, and it's like when you work like a certain amount of overtime, you turn down overtime because like, it's all going to go to taxes, so there's no sense in even doing it. And now that changes the game for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's in the House bill, and then the Senate will work its will, and then it goes back to the House. So again, there's a lot more work to do, but you can't really underestimate the importance of what just happened this morning when Speaker Johnson pulled that off and got that bill passed. Really, really big step, because had he not pulled it off, we would have had concerns over the Memorial Day recess. All the lobbyists and the forces start getting involved and try to kill these bills and change these bills. The Speaker delivered the product. Now it's our turn to do our job. We need to pass it, send it back to the Speaker, get it passed, put it on President's desk by July 4th.
Well, I pray to God we get it done. And I appreciate you breaking down some of that stuff. I'm a ham and egger when it comes to some of the ins and outs of this stuff. So I appreciate you breaking it down. Let me move over here real quick to the, I know you had a visit to China recently. And one of the things that President Donald Trump has done almost immediately when he came in was shut the border down here. We've seen the border pretty much, be plugged up completely. But there's been so much fentanyl that has gotten through and coming from China. That has been the major issue with China creating this stuff, getting it to the Mexican cartels and then bringing it in, which in my opinion, it's like an act of war that we're seeing from China doing that. So what was it like? What was your visit about over to China? How does it look as far as us fighting back on this fentanyl crisis?
Yeah, well, the president, just before I left for China, met with me in the Oval Office. And if you remember, this was back in March. He had put a 20% fentanyl tariff on China because of what they're doing. And to break that down in a little more detail, The Chinese shipped the precursors, the raw materials for fentanyl to the Mexican cartels. The Mexican cartels then produce the final product and bring it across the southern border. So my mission over to China was to convey a message on behalf of President Trump, and that was you've got to stop shipping these precursors to the cartels in Mexico. Some of it actually even goes to Canada and a little bit to the United States. Then, of course, the finished product comes in the United States. So that was the negotiation. They agreed to a plan to actually stop the precursors. So that's something that's currently being negotiated. When Jameson Greer, our trade ambassador, and Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, were in Geneva a couple of weeks ago, this was on the table. Remember, they lowered the tariffs from 145% down to 30%, but 20% of that 30% is a fentanyl tariff. So these negotiations I began in Beijing in March on behalf of the president and his great team are currently on the table being discussed because, Alec, if we can stop the fentanyl coming into this country, it would save nearly 100,000 lives a year. It's the leading cause of death for 18 to 45-year-old Americans. It's a horrible scourge in our country. And so thank God for President Trump, who has not only secured the southern border now, but is also now fighting the fentanyl war with China.
Yeah, and it almost seems like if we didn't get President Trump elected back in November, that we'd almost have no chance in this fentanyl crisis that's happening. It would only continue to get worse. Nobody has been doing anything. They had no incentive. China had no incentive to stop doing this because they were getting away with literal murder here by getting this stuff through the United States. And then the second piece of this is going to be the cartels, which it seems like we see what happened in Venezuela or El Salvador, I should say. When President Bukele came in, and now it's a whole different looking country. The whole scope changed because you got that one element out of the society. And it's like if Mexico could do the same with these cartels, Mexico would look like a completely different country. And it seems like it would be a great opportunity now to finally force these people out into the open and get rid of them altogether. And what a difference that would make for everybody.
Well, look, President Trump is shaking up the entire world order. It's remarkable. We saw that in his visit last week to the Middle East. And what's going on right now is he is filling a vacuum that was created by Joe Biden's weak and inept leadership. America is back, and it's pushing the forces of Russia and China back on their heels in the Middle East and other parts around the world. But let's bring it back to those cartels and what's going on in Mexico. I had a bill that I introduced that would declare these cartels as terrorist organizations, foreign terrorist organizations, because it really is terrorism. They kill more Americans than terrorists do here on our soil. So what did President Trump do when he got sworn in? He declared an order that makes these Mexican cartels declared and classified as terrorist organizations. Why is that important? That now gives the president, the U.S. military, our intelligence assets, additional tools because they're not just a Mexican gang now, they're a terrorist organization. And by law, that gives our military and our intelligence capabilities a whole different level of aggressiveness that indeed is needed because we've got to go on the offense to take these cartels out because the Mexican government's scared to death of them. They're not going to get this taken care of. We've got to take this by in our own hands. And I'm confident President Trump, through his strength and strong leadership, will solve this problem.
Yeah, well said, Senator. And one of the things that's always strange to me is like how when they talk about deporting some of these dangerous criminals, like we just had the one that they deported to Sudan, wherever it was. Like we had these guys that were here. They're always, it seems like right now, the federal judges always are more concerned about what's going to happen to these people when they get deported. They're worried, they're concerned about, oh, it's dangerous where we're sending them, not about the dangers that they pose to the American citizens here. So it just seems like everything is kind of backwards when it comes to that. Like you have dangerous people here and we're like, oh, well, we're afraid that they're going to get hurt if we send them to this country. It's like, well, what about the American citizens here? That's what's driving so many people crazy.
And rightfully so. It is just incredibly, I mean, it's absurd to see the philosophy and the ideology of the left. And thank God this last election, the Americans sent a resounding message that to take the woke, absurd, crazy policies of the Democrats, highlighted by Kamala Harris, and tell her, You have no business being our commander in chief. Can you imagine if that election would have gone the other way in 24? I mean, the country's heading in such a different and much, much better direction. But back on some of these like the Trans de Aragua gang out of Venezuela, this is a gang that was hatched in a Venezuelan prison in 2014. These are hardened criminals. They're involved in organized crime, in drugs, murder, human trafficking. And this is not something that, like a state like Montana, where I'm from, is immune from. Our local law enforcement, working with ICE, took 6 of these Trans de Aragua gang members out of the neighborhoods in my hometown of Bozeman,
Wow.
Montana, here in February. And I'll tell you what, Alec, I spoke to our law enforcement there, these great men and women in our sheriff's department, and they told me that last year they were aware of these bad guys being in our community, but the Biden administration would not let ICE go in and arrest these guys and deport them. They said as soon as the election happened, guess what happened? ICE starts to get involved. ICE sends agents in from Denver, Colorado. They come into Bozeman. They grab these murderers and get them out of our country. So that's an example in small town Montana of a way that President Trump is making this country safer.
And meanwhile, you have your colleagues on the other side of the aisle are trying to stop ICE from doing their job. They're assaulting ICE agents, and that's what makes you just, say, well, what are you doing here? Whose side are you really on? People even that voted for you have to be wondering, hey, why are you sticking up for the people here that are trying to hurt us? And it's almost like Senator too. I've been in that White House briefing room with Caroline Levitt, and it's like when she reads out the list of these crimes that have been committed, it almost seems like the media is completely desensitized to it. It's like they don't even hear her. They're right back with the next question about why are you deporting these people? You shouldn't be doing it. It just seems like it doesn't faze them at all.
Yeah, I mean, this is why the American people rejected the Democrat Party. And looking at polling numbers this last week, the Democrats are just lost in the wilderness. They don't know what they're for. They know they're against law enforcement. They're against the rule of law. They're against secure borders. And the American people are saying, I mean, think about it. If you're a center left mom, raising your kids in suburbia, and you say, I'm concerned about the safety of my children, you'd say these Democrats are nuts. They really are, and they're not changing their ways, Alec. That's the part. You think they learned from their mistakes, but they're doubling down on it right now, which frankly is to their political peril. And thank God.
Yeah. Well said. Last thing I want to hit you because it just happened last night. There, you had a tragedy happen in D.C. You had the young couple gunned down, guy screaming "Free Palestine" as he's in the handcuffs there. So, what was your take? When did you hear this news? What was your breakdown on that?
Oh, just sickening. We were on the floor of the Senate last night voting. Actually, what we're doing right now, late last night, we'll be doing it today. We're repealing one of these crazy rules the Biden administration put in place at the very end that basically will ban combustion engines in automobiles. Can you believe it? I mean, that's literally what they did. And we are repealing that. We'll repeal that today on the Senate floor. We were voting late into the night on this issue. And I ran into Ted Cruz, in fact, in the cloakroom of the Senate. It was about maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock. He said, Steve, look at this. There have been 2 Israelis gunned down in Washington, a few blocks away from the U.S. Capitol. It's like shocking by some, Free Palestine guy. And I mean, just sickening. And it's just so tragic. You look at these 2 beautiful wives. I understand they were engaged. They were going to be engaged to be married. That the gentleman had bought his now soon to be fiance a ring. A beautiful couple, young, their entire lives ahead of them. They were down in front of that, the Jewish Museum, and gunned down. It's just sickening. So we just express our condolences to our Jewish friends. And again, this just shows how dangerous it is right now with the anti-Semitism that's going on in this country, and why we must stand without stuttering, without reservation, to stand with our Jewish friends, to fight in full-throated condemnation on anti-Semitism, and to stand with Israel.
Yeah, I know President Trump came out with a strong statement on that on Truth Social pretty soon after it had happened. And it goes to show, too, that the temperature in this country, like the Democrats, I remember after President Trump got shot in the head there, they said, oh, maybe we should tone down the temperature. But it never toned down. The temperature only rose from that point on. And it just seems like every one of these issues, too, this kid was another, they call him educated. He had he went through the University of Illinois. He was radicalized somewhere along the way. And we just see that in so many of these universities, these kids, like the parents' worst nightmare is like you send your kid to a college university, you think they're going to get educated. They come out, they're all for Antifada. They're wearing those things on their head. They hate the police. They hate the country. And you're wondering, like, why are we even sending our kids to these schools? It just seems like it's a communist manufacturing company.
Yeah, it's a sad reality what's going on across so many of our campuses today. They're indoctrination camps. They're no longer educational institutions to teach the basics of a true liberal arts education, of great pieces of literature, of mathematics, of science. And now they become indoctrination camps here with these radical woke ideologies. It's very dangerous. And it's these kind of ideologies that produce political movements that can be totalitarian type regimes. And this is why we've got to have a full throat of condemnation of these ideologies. And of course, it leads to violence. That's where this ideology goes. And just again, a tragic night in Washington when these two young Israelis, members of the Israeli embassy team here in Washington, lost their lives.
Yeah, it's tragic, and prayers to the families. No doubt, a horrible situation for everybody there. And I know now you said, let me get you out of here. I know I'm up against the clock here. You got the Memorial Day recess here. What's your plans? What do you got going on? What do you guys got? Duck hunting, bear hunting? What's going on up there in Montana now these days?
Well, you mentioned bear hunting. Last weekend, I shot a really nice black bear in Montana. So I did. I was able to harvest a beautiful black bear in Southwest Montana. It was a wonderful hunt. I had 3 grizzly bears in close proximity. Those bears, of course, are endangered. You can't shoot those. But I saw a beautiful black bear. Was able to make a good shot. I've got my Glock 10 on my hip, but I threw in a Win Mag on my shoulder. So that was last Saturday night. But this weekend will be focused on our veterans. And on Friday, at a ceremony here, we're going to be naming a new veterans healthcare clinic there in Montana. And then Monday, I'll be at Memorial Day ceremonies in Montana. Of course, the summer day, my father's a Marine, but we'll reflect on the ultimate sacrifice that so many made. So that'll be my Memorial Day weekend, certainly, and be back home in Montana.
Awesome stuff. Well, Senator Daines, always an honor to have you on the podcast. I appreciate you taking the time. Hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. Good recess. Hope you guys get back at it in the Senate when you return and get this thing passed. And I'd love to have you on again down the line. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Alec.